Hello, my fellow Alaskans. How are we all doing out there on this beautiful Thursday evening? I know it has been a while since I was last able to get online and be able to talk to all of you. And tonight we are working hard to try to restream the live broadcast happening at Alaskans for Constitutional Rights. This week we're going to have David Ignell will be presenting Chapter 10 for Alaska Constitutional Rights and his book investigating Alaska Grand Juries in Alaska and the political corruption that is going on within our judicial branch. This is the 10th week of their broadcast. I missed last week. I'm going to do my best to try to get that one restreamed. We have been doing a lot of network issues here within the homestead where the warm weather of the previous week had caused a lot of cascading of snow and had knocked out a huge portion of our network here within our homestead, and we have been trying to get that all rebuilt, and hopefully we've got everything back to normal. That was part of the streaming problems you had seen the last time we were actually able to get online. We have actually gone and streamed several different events since then, but we seem to be running into the same issue around the entire state. Every place we seem to go, they either don't have a network that is capable of streaming off of, or you can't even get connected to the networks within inside of their residences that we were within. So today, again, we are here with the Alaskans for Constitutional Rights, and it will be David Ignell, who will be, I believe that is his name. I hope I am not mispronouncing it there. He will be the one presenting the Chapter 10 of his book. And I'm just doing a quick scroll down here on the screen. Bear with me, trying to get to their very last broadcast. Yes, author and forensic journalist David Ignell will finish up, or will begin his review of Chapter 10 in his newest book, Alaska Grand Juries, available for download for free. I have provided a link to the Alaskans for Constitutional Rights, AFCR 1776.com. I'm going to get that down before the end of tonight. If you haven't done it already, please take the time to like and share this video. You can find this live right now on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Politadick and Politadick Unfiltered. You'll also be able to find this again on Rumble within the next 6 hours from now. It will be on that platform. And currently, if everything is working right, you can also find this, congratulations, on Politadick.com. That is Politadick.com/live. I'm hoping it works. I haven't taken the chance to actually look and see if it is running today and make sure it is running, but we did get the website pretty much up and running. It's not in top form yet. A lot of images didn't load like they were supposed to. The content of the article seems to be there, but no pictures loaded in, no top screen pictures. It all seems to want to show you an erectile dysfunction video as the main source pic for everything we have out there, unless we've taken the time to go in and manually get it changed. We are working on that, slowly getting that all fixed up. And we do have a few links that are broken out there, mainly in the videos area. For some reason, it did not import them when we upgraded and moved our site to the new web host. We are hoping to get that all cleared up. But again, Politadick.com/live is back up and running. You can also go to Politadick.com/support. Show your support for what we do. Help us grow. Help us become bigger and badder than the mainstream media that is out there. We want to be able to find ourselves every single day in front of mainstream media, doing what they refuse to do, live streaming the events that need to be covered. If I would have known what was happening at the Matsu School Board meeting the other night with the bus drivers, I would have been there, but I didn't receive the notification until it was too late, and I'm under a huge busy work schedule. Looks like they have began on the other end. Let me do a little bit of quick changing around here on my camera views that I have going on. We'll make sure, hopefully we can get it all back up here on the screen. Oh, it looks like it worked perfectly. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. I'm going to turn my microphone off and turn.
We covered the Juneau Grand Jury's investigation in 1985 of Governor Bill Sheffield and his administration. And we saw how they ended up issuing like a 69-page report after a 10-week investigation and recommended that the governor be impeached and recommended several other things for the legislature to consider. That right there was the high watermark for grand juries in Alaska up until now. Unfortunately, the rest of my book is going to detail how the grand jury has been undermined by politicians. It's been a downhill path for the last 37 years, and we're all going to change this. So what I want to focus on today is really two main points. The first point is going to be to show how the grand jury was attacked by two of our three government branches. The executive, which was run by Bill Sheffield. Obviously they didn't like what the grand jury was doing, recommending that he be impeached. But kind of surprisingly for some, and maybe not for others, was the legislature. We're going to take a look at how the legislature also started attacking the grand jury and showed their true colors. Kind of a subset of this issue is that in some of these quotes that I'm going to give you today from my book, you're going to see that the legislature is not an appropriate body to investigate things. The reason for that is because they're political. And so you get, and we're going to see in this chapter how the Senate investigation into the governor was all political. And so nothing really happened. And then the last thing we're going to cover today is after the, spoil alert, the Senate decides not to impeach the governor. And after they handed that decision down, the Fairbanks paper, the Daily Miner, came down to Juneau, and they interviewed 9 of the 15 grand jurors. And that's towards the end of my book, or the end of my chapter. And there's some very enlightening things that the grand jurors said that I think is good for all of us to keep in mind as we go forward and instruct others how grand juries should act. So without further ado, on chapter 10, on the first page, which is 74, I'm going, the first paragraph I'm not going to read. I'm just going to talk about how Mr. Sheffield's attorneys targeted the reporting powers of the Alaska Grand Jury. And there's a quote, the next paragraph down, one of the Democrat senators, Robert Ziegler from Ketchikan, he quoted, he goes, "This grand jury was led down a path where it violated every sense of fairness and decency. It embarked on courses of action that are unethical and illegal. It has turned its legal function into a political morass." That's a really interesting quote. I think Ziegler, I haven't looked him up, but I remember his name from when I was a kid growing up, and I think he was around for a while. And here you have an elected representative saying that the Juneau Grand Jury has embarked on courses of action that are unethical and illegal. I mean, what a bad thing to say. And it just goes to show you that you I won't say any more. I'll let you all come to your own conclusions about that. But it's just very I think it's instructive. I think we're going to run into politicians, now that the citizens are, our force is building about having grand jury investigations. So I think this is instructive that, we can't always expect legislators to act in our best interest. And so let's not be discouraged. if that happens, if we have legislators who try to undermine what we're doing. We've been here before, and so we'll know how to deal with it. So at the bottom of the page, of page 74, I have in there, so 3 weeks after the Juneau judge approved the public release of the Sheffield report, the Alaska Senate assembled in a specially called session in Juneau to consider the grand jury's recommendation. So just think about that for a second. In the middle of summer, a grand jury recommends that the governor gets impeached, and 20 senators come from all over Alaska. They cancel some of the plans that they have, and they come down into Juneau to consider the impeachment of the governor. So think of all the power that a grand jury has. And it doesn't have the power to, we've covered this, it doesn't have the power to make laws, but its recommendations hold a lot of weight. So here you've got the Juneau grand jury basically forcing even though it doesn't have any specified powers to do this, it ends up having all 20 Alaska senators fly down in the middle of summer to have what would turn into about a 2 or 3 week trial. So that just shows you some of the power that the grand jury has. Going over to the next page. So this was a big deal across the nation. I mean, it's not very often that a grand jury recommends that a governor get impeached. And so this was reported in the New York Times. And the bottom of that quote there at the top of the page says, while few senators have indicated approval of the office space lease in Fairbanks, at least 7 have shown irritation with various aspects of the case being presented to them. And that's another telling comment, because, no one is saying that this office lease situation in Fairbanks, where a political fundraiser, his consortium ends up with $10 million in their pocket. People aren't contesting that. They're just irritated that the grand jury has been able to force them down to Juneau to have to deal with this. They've got it. To me, that tells me that some of these legislators had we're mightier than thou type attitude. Who are these citizens who can, force us to come down here? And that was the attitude, I think. And we'll see that later on. So again, I think that's just a very telling quote. But let me keep going on here. So the next paragraph talks about how the senators retained Samuel Dash, a former Watergate prosecutor, as their attorney to advise the Senate, was a Watergate prosecutor. And then you have Mr. Sheffield has his team of attorneys, and one of them included Philip Lacavera, who was also from Watergate. So this was a pretty high-powered deal. You've got 2 more Watergate attorneys who've been hired, one by the Senate, one by the governor. And as we saw last week, George Frampton was hired to represent the Juneau grand jury as special prosecutor. So you've got 3 ex-Watergate attorneys showing up in Juneau in the summer of 1985. So this was a pretty interesting deal. So about halfway down the page, I'm going to read a quote from Samuel Dash. And his clients are all 20 Alaska senators, and he's their legal expert, and he's a neutral party. And this is what he tells them. He goes, there is ample evidence in the grand jury testimony that the governor's office tampered with the lawful procurement procedures of the Department of Administration with the knowledge of the governor to promote a political and financial supporter. Such activity undermines the confidence of the public in government and raises serious ethical questions And the legislature should consider the statutory reforms recommended by the grand jury as a means of preventing this kind of activity in the future, unquote. That is such a powerful quote, because here you have one of the top attorneys in the country. He's looking at the Juneau grand jury report and he's saying, I agree with you. He's saying, with the knowledge of the governor to promote a political and financial supporter, and such activity undermines the confidence of the public in government. I mean, right there is just a powerful statement in support of having grand jury investigations. Down towards the bottom of the page, there's another quote by Samuel Dash that I want to read. He goes, I am aware of a number of additional allegations concerning the governor's conduct which have been publicly disclosed and partially investigated. However, to my knowledge, none of these investigations has resulted in any findings by a judicial or legislative agency. This committee presently does not have the necessary staff resources or time to undertake an independent investigation and to decide these collateral allegations in a complete and fair manner required by the Constitution of Alaska. So again, here we have the Senate's own attorney, own legal expert, saying there's more to this story. There's stuff that hasn't been investigated and probably needs to, but we don't have the necessary resources to do that. So think about this. This is 1985. The oil money has only been flowing through the pipeline for 7 years. Now it's been flowing through the pipeline for 40 years. So how much worse off are we today than we were back in 1985? And this is why we need grand jury investigations in every corner of Alaska. I mean, not only Kenai, but Anchorage, Palmer, Fairbanks, Juneau. We need them all over the state. Kotzebue, no. We need to we need to get rid of this corruption that we're all concerned about, and even in places where there may not be corruption. How better to know than to do a grand jury investigation? Because this is what this is what Dash said in the prior quote that I read to you. He goes, such activity undermines the confidence of the public in government and raises serious ethical questions. So this is why we need the grand jury to be investigating all these things. Okay, so going to the bottom of page 76, here's one more quote by Mr. Dash. He goes, there's no question that the evidence of the grand jury, especially the evidence coming from staff people in the Department of Administration, indicated that certainly within the past 2 years or year, this was an increasing situation, and the concern that you raised, Senator Fakes, is a real one. And then he goes on, I think that what Alaska faces is perhaps inadequate legislation to deal with it, inadequate standards to deal with it. And to that extent, I think that ought to be a top priority of the legislature. So what right here, Samuel Dash is responding to Senator Fakes. I believe she might have been from Fairbanks. Well, I'm not sure where she was from, but anyway, Dash is saying that the activity that the grand jury has identified has been increasing. So just think of where the state would have been had the Juneau grand jury not stepped in and put a halt to this. It would have been a lot worse. So I want to go down towards the bottom of the page. There's a long dialogue that again, this was taken from the transcript of the proceedings in the Senate. And there's a long dialogue between Senator Bill Ray, who is from Juneau, and Sam Dash. And at the very bottom of the page, Bill Ray, this is page 77, Bill Ray asks his client, excuse me, Senator Ray is asking Sam Dash, who is his legal expert. He goes, do you think that the grand jury in this case exceeded its authority? And Mr. Dash, a little bit on the next page, he goes, this is three subparagraphs down. He goes, the Constitution says that those powers should not be in any way interfered with. So this is what we're dealing with today with Supreme Court Order 1993. The grand, right before that, Dash is talking about how, the grand jury reports is covered by both the statute and also covered by the Constitution. And he goes, the statute authorizes the grand jury to investigate and make recommendations with regard to the welfare of the state and safety. And then the next line down, he's saying, the Constitution says that those powers should not be in any way interfered with. I mean, how powerful is that? I mean, but what we'll see is that for the next 35 years, including through December 1st of this year, the government, various branches of the government, especially our judicial system, has been interfering with those powers. So again, I mean, Sam Dash was one of the most recognized lawyers in the United States. And right here, he's saying that the Constitution is so clear that the power of the grand jury cannot be interfered with. So that is just such that's a powerful opinion for our purposes. So going over to the next page, we are now on page 79 at the very top, the first full paragraph. This is where, so Mr. Dash has finished his opening presentation. So now Sheffield's Watergate, ex-Watergate attorney, Philip Lacavera stands up. And I'm not going to get into the detail of what he said because we'll be here way too long. I'm just going to skip over this next few pages because in my book, they're mostly devoted to legal arguments, if you will, showing that Lacavera made a lot of misleading statements about the grand jury. Basically, Lacavera had to throw up a smoke screen. I mean, his client, the governor, has been caught red-handed. So he needs to do something to, try to get the heat out of the kitchen. So he attacks the grand jury. And in the next subparagraph there, he said, well, the grand jury was misled, he goes, either deliberately or negligently about its lawful functions, and so was the Superior Court. He's just blaming everybody else. He's trying to provide cover for his client, the governor, who messed up in a major way, so he pins it on the grand jury. And what was really interesting about this is that the grand jury was not represented in the Senate hearing. George Frampton, the special counsel, was not part of the Senate. So Lacavera is, he's got no one there to stand up for the grand jury. So he's just trying to have his way. So I don't want to say too much more about him. I mean, he just butchered the law is what he did. And for a few pages here, I go through and take some of his arguments and show how he was incorrect legally. But we don't need to get into that. So going down, we are now, I'm going to skip through to page 83. If you'll turn to page 83 of the book. So we're done with the opening statements. And so what happened after Lacavera finished up is that the senators commenced their own independent investigation into the governor's involvement in the Fairbanks lease. And as I write here, for a variety of reasons as set forth below, I'm in the middle of this page. For a variety of reasons as set forth below, the Senate investigation paled in comparison to the Juneau grand juries. These shortcomings provide compelling evidence that the legislative branch is not an appropriate forum to investigate any matter which may have political implications. And here's the reasons that I give for that. First of all, the senators can condense their investigation into a period of less than 2 weeks compared to the 10 weeks the grand jury took to investigate. That's point number one. Next, point number two, the senators called only 8 witnesses compared to the 44 called by the Juneau grand jury. Half of these witnesses consisted of Mr. Sheffield, his chief of staff, his executive assistant, and the fundraiser. The other 4 were the attorney general, 2 state attorneys under him, and a deputy commissioner. Incredibly, the Senate did not call any of the state employees who felt pressured by Mr. Sheffield's administration into taking actions they felt were not in the public's best interest. So, I mean, this is just mind-boggling. I mean, it's really not. If you think the legislature is a fair place, then, you know, it's mind-boggling. But, you know, this really shows what the Senate was all about. They're only calling top level of people. They're only calling people that are political. They're not calling to testify the people who, you know, personally observed what was going on and you know, were undermined in what they were trying to do and negotiate this Fairbanks lease. So then going down to the bottom of the page, the third point is the Senate proceedings were far less efficient because of their public nature open to the media. Most of the 8 witnesses were questioned by anywhere from 10 to 15 senators, some of whom later asked follow-up questions. Mindful of Winston Churchill's famous quip that politicians should never let a crisis go to waste, Alaskans can only speculate how much of the legislative investigation was more about political posturing and campaigning rather than discerning the truth. So again, this, you know, the word I use for this is a political circus. This is what this was. You know, you probably had legislators asking the same questions over and over just so they could get their picture on TV and be in the news and all that good stuff. They weren't trying to get to the bottom of the truth. So in the next paragraph, and now we're on the top of page 84, there was some really interesting statements that a few days after the Senate hearings had concluded, which talked about this political pressure cooker that all these senators were in. So one of them was Democrat Betty Ferencamp. She was quoted as saying, "There were toes stepped on that it will take years for people to get over, and I think that's sad." So then her Republican counterpart in Fairbanks, who was Senate President Don Bennett, he was even more candid. He goes, and this is the second full paragraph on this page, he goes, "I think you should know that possibly some of the gravest forces that I've seen in my 9 years in Juneau were reflected in that pressure." And then he went on to say that much of that pressure came from some of the many Sheffield appointees to boards, commissions, councils, and office. There's so many interesting things in that quote by Senate President Don Bennett, because he's talking about the power that these unelected officials have, boards, commissions, councils, and offices. What does that say about our state government? That all these unelected officials can put pressure on elected senators. I mean, that, just think about that for a second. And I mean, this is where the pressure is coming from. So this is what we're, you know, and he didn't say lobbyists. I mean, just think of how it's like in Juneau when you have the lobbyists that are putting pressure on these legislators. So we need these grand jury investigations to get control of our state back. And then I really, going on to the next paragraph, there's another quote by Senator Bennett. He goes, for many, many months, he'll remember, he's talking about Bill Sheffield here. He goes, for many, many months, he'll remember each and every one of us who made him a star, and the evidence will be seen by which districts have gold-plated center lines on their highways, as opposed to those that don't get a shovel turned over. This is such an important quote in an admission by the Senate president. He's saying that this is all political. So for senators who stood up and for the people, for truth and for justice, they're not going to get any money sent to their districts. But the senators who defended him, they're going to have gold-plated center lines on their highways. They're going to be funneled, all kinds of money is going to be funneled to them. So this is another indication why investigations in the legislature are not a good idea. This is why we need the grand jury to investigate these things. We've been over this and talked about how the grand jury is the least political body, and we're going to see that at the end of this chapter. So going on in the next paragraph, I'm going to skip over most of this, but I'm just going to point out where. So you have two different reports that come out of the Senate Rules Committee. The first one is by 4 Republican members of the Senate Rules Committee. So they issue a report, and I won't go through the details of what they said there. But going over to the next page, page 85 of my book, in the middle of the page, you'll see where I say the lone Democrat on the Senate Rules Committees issued his own supplemental report, in which he specifically noted his, quote, non-concurrence, unquote, with significant portions of paragraphs 10 through 16 of the majority's report, and submitted his own views. So there we have it. Truth in the legislature depends on what political party you belong to. I think enough said right there. But there was one thing that all these senators could agree on, Democrats and Republicans. So if we go to the next paragraph, at the bottom of that paragraph, I write, all 5 members also concurred in the last 2 paragraphs of the majority report, which stated, and well, here's actually where they agree with the grand jury. They say, well, government officials must always aim for what is best for the public, not merely for what might be okay. That was paragraph 23. Paragraph 24. Alaskans will not tolerate those who violate this duty. Okay, that's like generic language. But then going down to the next paragraph, all 5 members of the Senate Rules Committee still found grounds to criticize the Juneau grand jury and called for controlling its investigatory power. So paragraph 21, in particular, the grand jury should have been instructed that impeachment is a political process and not a substitute for judicial remedies. And paragraph 22, we also recommend that a resolution requesting judicial council recommendations of grand jury investigative procedures be approved. So here you have all 20 senators wanting to undermine the power of the Alaska grand jury. I mean, it's pathetic. Going over to the next page, there's a quote here from a Democrat senator that this is page 86. Democrat, you'll see about a quarter of the way down. Before the Senate proceedings concluded, Democrat Senator Frank R. Ferguson from Kotzebue introduces a floor statement which read in pertinent part. I'm going to read the last sentence of that. He goes, I find the legal basis of allowing a grand jury to issue a report naming a public official without returning an indictment to be deliberately or unprofessionally negligent. Senator Ferguson was dead wrong. This is a complete misstatement of the historical function of grand juries as we've, been studying for the last several weeks. I mean, this is what they're there for, to promote public confidence in our public officials. So, so after the senators introduced resolutions and amendments, so there was resolution number 5 AM, which was adopted unanimously in a 20-0 vote. And the second to last paragraph of that page, it goes, further resolved that the Senate respectfully requests the Judicial Council to consider a possible amendment to the state constitution for presentation to the voters for ratification. So here you have legislators, the Senate, that wants the Alaska Constitution to be amended to lessen the powers of the grand jury that our founders felt it was so important to put in place. So that's not only a problem, but here's something else that's important in that resolution. Even the senators knew that to lessen the power of the grand jury, there's got to be an amendment to the state constitution. They understood that. So my question to the Alaska Supreme Court is that what don't you get out of that? I mean, if the senators know there's got to be an amendment to the state constitution, why didn't the judges, why didn't the Supreme Court judges know that? And as we're going to find out later in the book, they decided that they were going to amend the Constitution through court rules, which they did back in 1988, and then they just did in December 1st of 2022. So not much has changed. So now we get to the grand jury and their reaction of this. So over on the top of page 87, and I'm going to quote a lot of this stuff as we go through, so try to follow along, because these are quotes coming from the Juneau grand jurors themselves. So after the Senate decided not to impeach the governor, the foreperson of the Juneau grand jury was quoted as saying, "The jury's two major goals were to give the matter the widest possible exposure so that the public could make up its own mind and public officials could be held accountable. I think that however the Senate hearings have turned out, I would certainly have to agree that our two major emphases have been completed." Absolutely. They brought public attention to what was going on, and in that they fulfilled their goal. So moving down to the next paragraph, I talk about how on August 9th, 1985, the Fairbanks New Daily Miner published an article based on an interview they did on August 7th. They interviewed 9 of the 15 jurors. And this is interesting. The 9 jurors agreed to be interviewed on the condition that their names not be used. One juror said, "It's primarily because our identity was such a subject during the impeachment proceedings, and we felt so strongly that the grand jury process relies on the anonymity of the jurors." This is what I've been saying throughout the book, is that one of the keys to the grand jury investigation is that it's anonymous. This is why when grand juries throughout the history of the United States have taken on corruption, they've been able to do so because the grand jury's identity is anonymous in many of these cases. And so they felt it was important. The 15 Alaska grand jurors, they would only be interviewed on the condition that their identity remained anonymous. And that's important to consider. Going down to the next paragraph, it talks about, so prior to this interview, some people had accused the Juneau grand jury of being a Republican cabal, out to ruin a Democrat governor shortly before the 1986 elections. Well, this interview proved that that was wrong. That was false news. The last two sentences of this paragraph, of the 9 jurors interviewed, none were Republican, 1 was a Democrat, and 8 were independent. All 9 had voted for Mr. Sheffield in 1982. So that right there just gave the Juneau Grand Jury instant credibility. This wasn't a political witch hunt. This was 15 citizens getting together and doing what's right for Alaska. And they even voted to impeach the guy that they had all 9 of these people had voted for. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy how these people were attacked. Going on to the next paragraph. Another accusation was, oh, these are all quote, a pack of wrathful state employees out for revenge on a big business boss who is impatient with bureaucrats and bureaucracy. I mean, the Democrats were throwing out all kinds, they were just throwing stuff up on the walls to see if anything would stick. And this article, this interview, put all that to rest, because the Juneau Grand Jury consisted of 4 housewives, 3 state employees, 3 private enterprise people, 2 retirees, 1 municipal employee, 1 nonprofit employee, and 1 consultant. So that's a pretty good cross-section of Alaska right there. It represented citizens. It did its job. So I'm going to read the next 2 paragraphs. These were 2 paragraphs that David Haig had underlined in his copy. And I wrote, the interview of the grand jurors revealed that when the Juneau Grand Jury first commenced their investigation in April, the individual grand jurors were evenly divided, with about 1/3 for the governor, 1/3 against, and 1/3 undecided. However, by the end, they were nearly unanimous, with 14 jurors voting to issue the report on their findings to the public, and the remaining juror voting to indict on criminal charges. In their words, there was, quote, no one for innocent, unquote. So think about this. Here you have mixed, political loyalties on the grand jury. You have a mixture of backgrounds and occupations, and they start out divided. But in the end, no one was for innocent. So this is how things should work in our society, where 15 individuals from different walks of life, but are all citizens. They're all citizens of the state of Alaska. They can go in and they can, they didn't have to be unanimous, but they were. And so I think that's just to me, that's such an inspiration for grand juries in Alaska, that people can put aside their political differences, their different occupations, all this thing, and they focus on the truth. It was interesting. I had an editor of a paper tell me 3 weeks ago that truth is subjective. BS. Truth is truth. And give the people a chance and they'll come up with it. So, and then the last paragraph, I'll read this. The jurors revealed that at times they met in unrecorded work sessions without the prosecutors and deliberated on their own. At other times, they called or recalled witnesses the prosecutors had not planned to call. They made the decision to grant Mr. Sheffield's chief of staff immunity from prosecution so they could force him to testify. They wanted to get to the bottom of the truth as well as possible. So what's important there is grand jurors acting outside of the control of prosecutors. Juxtapose that with what's going on in Kenai and elsewhere, where the prosecutors want to control everything. So this is important precedent right there to show that, and this is what we said back in the early chapters of the book. Prosecutors are nothing more than advisors, and it's up to the grand jury whether they want them or not. Going over to the next page, I see that I need to wrap this up real quick here. Just got a couple more minutes. We are on the last page here pretty much. So The first paragraph there I was going to read, but it's just it's two jurors talking about basically the personal attacks that the press and not the press as much, but that the Democrats were making on them. Then the next paragraph, I'm going to read here the next 3 or 4 paragraphs, and then probably that'll be it. But the grand jurors talked about how stressful the ordeal was, especially towards the end, but they all said it was worth it. One man said, quote, "I was walking down the street when it was all over and the report was issued, and I was really proud to be an Alaskan," unquote. One woman said, quote, "We got to be really good friends because of that sense that we had to carry this weight around for the state. There have not been very many people who have had to carry that weight around," unquote. So right there, I mean, we're talking about citizens citizens coming together, the camaraderie of being on a grand jury and trying to get to the truth. The next paragraph. In hindsight, none of the grand jurors wish that they would have done things differently. One juror said, quote, "I feel the report was the appropriate way, the only way the public was going to know in a timely manner what went on," unquote. Another juror said, "The fact that government is run this way just eats me," unquote. Another juror added, quote, "I'm ashamed of the governor," unquote. Then my next paragraph. The anonymous, nonpartisan grand jury did a better job of getting to the truth than any other type of investigative body could have done. In front of the randomly selected, unbiased, and short-term Juneau grand jury, the truth had the best chance of succeeding against the strong headwinds of political intimidation and partisan persuasion faced by the 20 senators who evaluated the governor's conduct. The public was educated as to shameful practices by the executive branch, and government transparency was increased. The Senate adopted resolutions to carry out some of the grand jury recommendations. An informed citizenry armed with the truth eventually voted out an incumbent with a problematic administration. Mr. Sheffield was defeated in his own party's Democratic primary in 1986. So I'm going to stop it right there. I was going to read the next couple paragraphs, but I want to leave some room for some questions here. But, even though the senators didn't impeach Sheffield, the grand jury ultimately won because they armed the citizens with the truth. And Sheffield didn't even make it out of his own party's Democrat primary in a year later. So they were successful all the way through. So with that, well, let's see. I can't help myself here. Page 89. I've got to go back to the quote. The first quote, quarter of the way down, where this is that San Francisco newspaper that 80 years ago wrote, quote, "The grand jury has always been disliked by politicians. It is the only body charged with investigating public offices and the only part of the prosecuting machinery that does not have to go before a political convention," unquote. And that's exactly what happened in Juneau in 1985. So I'll open it up for questions.
Well, thank you, David. Going over this material is refreshing. Like, I think it's pretty exciting to hear about like the most recent comments of the that you were reading of the quotes from the jurors, like the reality that we can have a more robust civil experience and have a better citizenship and have relationships that are built because we're pursuing these things that are truths, right? So I appreciate that. I noticed that the room there in Anchor Point got disconnected, so I don't know if they're coming back or what the scoop is there. But I would open up the floor to anybody else that is on the call, hiding in the wings, listening along. If you have questions for David.
And Cody, while we're waiting for anybody else to ask a question, just to your point, we covered this back in chapter 6, where there was the 2 recent studies by learned scholars, and that's exactly the point that they talked to, Cody, was, it gives citizens a chance to a feeling that they're involved in something important. And it's just and this goes all the way back to what that Supreme Court justice said back in 1790. It's a great tool for two-way communication between those who are governed and those who govern, and it fosters this spirit of togetherness, of unity, of just it does a lot of good things.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've seen is like we're doing this in conjunction with AFCR, and I see Chandra has posted a comment. Room has a question awaiting transmission, so they might be watching on Facebook. Let me switch my own gears here and make sure I'm watching the Facebook chat. But I was going to say, there is a question in chat. I'll finish my comment. The reality that we're here with AFCR, right? AFCR spun out of sort of this weird dynamic in the world where we realized that our constitutional rights were being subdued, right? Overtrodden, whatever the word term is. So I think it's been one of the most amazing outcomes over the last 2 and 3 years is the relationships and the communities that have been built around principles that are important in our lives. And so to walk this out, to have these relationships, to have conversations about grand jury and the merits there, and it's just I'm sort of beside myself with joy that this is a part of life now. Whereas before it could have been there, but we didn't quite comprehend what we were giving up by not doing it. So I really appreciate this. The question online was, are there any of those legislators or judges still in seats? That's a good question.
No, this was 37. This was 37 years ago. I doubt any of those legislators are still kicking around the Capitol building in Juneau. Several of them are. I mean, I was aging myself a little bit. I was 25 years old. I was in Juneau that summer, and I was actually that was my first year of I was clerking for a law firm that was kitty corner from the Capitol building. And, I didn't even know this was going on. So there's people around who participated in that. I mean, if I'm 25, I mean, maybe the youngest legislator would have been, early 30s. So that would put them around 70 right now. So there's people who remember this for sure.
I'd be curious about doing a deep dive, and I probably won't do this.
So I'm glad, so here's one thing that I called for in my book. I do know. So there's a guy that I know in Juneau, and he told me that his cousin was on this grand jury, and his cousin is now dead. And died of old age. There was 40, 50, 60-year-old people on this that 35 years ago. They're no longer with us. But one of the things I'm calling for in my book is I think there ought to be recognition by the Alaska legislature, which apologizes to these grand jurors and says, look, we attacked you, and we shouldn't have. We should have applauded you. I'd like to see some kind of formal recognition for the 15 jurors who they devoted 10 weeks to this. They spent a lot of time in 69 pages, and they were criticized. This was not easy. But I think this is overdue. And I think their heirs or their survivors, for those that have passed on, I think that they would appreciate some kind of formal recognition by the Alaska State Legislature for the service that these people provided. Because just think of where we would have been had they not. So, yeah, I'd like to see that done.
That would be amazing. Well, I don't see any other questions pouring in. Anybody in the Zoom meeting that wants to unmute and ask any questions?
Hi, Cody and David. This is Chandra. I just want to start out again by thanking everyone for coming tonight and joining in and engaging. I want to give a little, along with everything that we're learning, we're seeing these things play out in real time in our state right now. And so I just want to encourage everyone and remind everyone about the sit-in on March 15th that starts, I think, at 8 a.m. And that's at wherever your local state courthouse is, if you can get there. And then I would encourage everyone to go to the Alaska Grand Jury Association.org website. That's Alaska Grand Jury Association.org. And there are forms there that this has to do with the current events in our state with what the Supreme Court justices have done illegally. And what David Ignell has been talking about. Anyway, there's forms there. You can take part and you can take action and send your support for this grand jury that is currently investigating. So there is something that we can do, even though we're not grand jurors ourselves. There is something that we can do, and we all need to take action. So thank you, David Ignell, and thank you, Cody, for continuing.
Yeah, Chandra, I just want to, something I want to add to what you just said. So I think I found out, or I watched the video since our last meeting. I saw the video of the principal in Alaska, the Christian principal, who is principal of the year in 2022, get hauled away by law enforcement to a mental hospital where she was held down and injected with drugs. And that is so disturbing. I watched about an hour or 50 minutes of the post that she put on Facebook before she got hauled away. And there are so many things that are wrong under the Constitution with what happened. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, things that we hold dear to us, that we have, I think many of us have felt that, these are locked in solid and nothing's going to happen. And that video proves that nobody listening to us tonight should go to bed feeling secure, because this law, HB 172, and there's other laws that have been passed. What Cody and Chandra, I know that the COVID regulations were some of the things that galvanized your resolve to do something about this and have brought people together. So there's a number of laws that have been put on the books here in recent years. HB 172, my understanding, came out of the governor's office. And everyone should be frightened for their freedom. Because basically someone anonymous can, if they don't like what you're saying, which I think is what happened in that principal's case, someone was offended by she was talking about her belief in God. Called her in, and she got hauled away. So, every person needs to decide, am I okay with that? And I think the answer is a resounding no. And so, what can we do about it? Well, the grand jury. The grand jury is the only body that can investigate all these things and come out with the truth. So we are literally fighting for our freedom right here, the way I see it. And so, the sit-ins and anything that is going to promote the grand jury, whether it's calling campaigns. I think it was Chandra asking me last week, just the frustration, in writing these letters to the governor and having nothing happen. But we're literally, our freedoms are at stake. And so I just urge everybody to, and spread the word. I mean, this is it's we the people. And if enough people don't stand up, then it's going to be we the minions, we the serfs, we the abused. So this is really important what you're talking about, Chandra, and I hope everybody listening takes it to heart.
David, thank you for bringing that up too, because you're right. HB 172 is absolutely chilling. It gives me goosebumps to think about it. I remember when it was being voted on, and I know that there were several legislators that were warned not to, and they disregarded that warning. There was one senator that didn't vote for it, one, and she's not in office now. And there were 2 representatives that didn't vote for it. And one of them is not in office right now. And that's because he decided to run for governor. And the senator, she just chose not to run again. But because of the abuse that she suffered and continues to suffer, actually. And so what you were talking about, first off, it was this lady's children, I think is what she said, that wrote those affidavits against her and made that report against her. And now the judge, I think, and the troopers and so on are saying that it was an unlawful order, that it was fake, and whoopsie doodle, and that oh my bad. And you're right. This isn't something that you're really gonna get. They've because she's gotten an attorney, and they've asked to see the original order, and they're not producing it. And so this is the exact prime example of a situation that does need to go to a grand jury that can demand those documents, where an attorney, sadly, I don't see that they're going to get anywhere. They should be able to, according to the law, they should be able to with discovery, I think. They should have access.
It's a huge issue, because here's what the state does. They've got an army of lawyers, and they also own the judges. So I know people who've been run out of $150,000 to $200,000 of money in legal fees, and they still lose. I mean, look at what Thomas Jack is the perfect example of this. This happened 12 years ago. They ran his family out of money, $130,000 to get through trial number 1, hung jury. And then, the attorney wanted another $60,000. The family didn't have it. So they hired a contract attorney who worked for 1/10 of the market, the going rate. And he was completely unprepared. And look what happened. I know of another case in Juneau that's going on right now, which is just a bogus case. And I think $175,000 has been spent by the family. This case that I'm looking at now, that I'm going to be writing about with the OCS, 130,000 or something like that spent on legal fees. It doesn't, you know, and so first of all, you know, 90% of people, maybe 95% of the people in Alaska don't have that kind of money to fight, and even if you do, you may not win. So because here's I was talking about this with someone the other day, and he agreed with me. So a lot of these things are coming up in confidential matters. So, you know, when you're like HB 172, you know, or child in need cases, think about all the people that have had their kids taken away in OCS by OCS. They don't get a jury. It's handled by a judge. And same thing with psychiatric type stuff, you know, and sexual assault. I mean, this is where tyranny thrives, because it's confidential stuff and confidential issues. And so, you know, on a lot of these things, there may be a judge that decides things, not a jury. And we've already seen what happens with our judges. You know, all you good folks in Kenai have seen, you know, how what the Alaska Judicial Council thought about your thoughts a couple weeks ago, when 28 of 30 of you wanted Judge, you know, Ms. Brewster as your next judge, and she got 0 votes, from my understanding. So this is the danger. Our legal system in Alaska is a complete mess, and we've seen this in Supreme Court Order 1993, where you've got the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in cahoots with the Attorney General. You've got the executive and you've got the judicial branch undermining, passing an illegal, unconstitutional rule to undermine the grand jury. So the only thing we've got is the people, and getting enough people together and raising a big enough stink about this that forces, that gets these grand juries to start investigating. And this goes back to the beginning of my book, where I quoted Ida B. Wells, an advocate from 150 years ago, where she said the best way to right a wrong is to shine the spotlight of truth on it. And that's what the grand jury can do. So I'll get off the soapbox. I know we're running past, but you are absolutely right, Chandra. I mean, we're in a bad place, where if you say something that somebody doesn't like, they now have the power to drag you off. How is this any different from Germany in 1932, 1933, when political opponents were drug off, you know, and put in a camp somewhere? I mean, we're not that far from that. Think about it.
Yes, that woman. You watch the video. I think there's not too well. There's probably still quite a few Alaskans, but you need Alaskans. You need to go watch the video that she posted, because she was, I think she was Facebook Live when the troopers came to her house and took her in. And I mean, it was the calmest, eeriest thing, where she's just like, you were here earlier today. They were there at her house the same day, just a few hours before, and the troopers didn't see anything wrong with her then. She wasn't a threat to herself, and she wasn't a threat to them. She wasn't a threat to anybody else. And they came and they were like, nope, here we are to take you in, ma'am. And they didn't even handcuff her, and they took her in, and then it got ugly when nobody was looking. And that's the thing, is that that's all of government, that's all of medical care, that's in all of these facilities and in-home care and everything. When nobody's looking, that's when things get ugly. And that's true of her experience as well. So I mean, it's awful they were even able to take her in. For one thing, she was by herself. But this is our oversight. this is the time for all of us to have eyes on all of these issues and everything that these people are doing, the judges, our legislators, etc. We need to have eyes on it because this is what they do in the dark.
Yeah, no, there was that 20-minute video that you talked about, Chandra, where, you know, she's got the two law enforcement on camera, and, you know, she's completely sane and of sound mind. And then I saw there was another video that she had posted, you know, it was maybe a week earlier, where, you know, she just woke up and you know, she felt compelled to say some things. It was Martin Luther King Day. She wanted to talk about tyranny. I mean, I started out, you know, what was really chilling for me, not chilling, but so in that video, the 4-hour video that she has where, you know, she feels that God wants her to, you know, to say these things, the tagline under her video is a quote from Martin Luther King. And it says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I used that exact same quote over 3 years ago when I did my first public report on the wrongful conviction of Thomas Jack. I started out my 15-page summary with that quote from Martin Luther King. And, you know, it was discouraging that so many people, you know, I mean, there was a lot of people who read that, a lot of people who wanted to do something about it, but people just said, nah, you know, I'm not going to become a zealous advocate about this because, you know, this was just an isolated case, and you know, poor Mr. Jack, but, you know, this would never happen to me. I don't live in a village. I'm not Alaskan native, you know, whatever. But here we are 3 years later, and it is happening to people that you would think it could never happen to. So take those words to heart. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, because we've let this stuff go. That happens to other people. I just keep my head down, and, you know, nothing's going to happen to me. Nope. I mean, I guess under that way of thinking, you can't express your faith anymore, because that's what she did. She expressed her faith and she got hauled away. So this is a wake-up call. And we need to get our state back for the people.
Yes. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of the wake-up calls.
Yeah.
But I really wish that people would get involved. And so, yeah, Cody has posted the link there to the, or no, sorry, I think Waynette posted that. Waynette posted the link to the Alaska Grand Jurors Association.org. And you'll get more information there. And everybody's going to start seeing a little bit more about what's going on. So again, thank you so much. Everybody that, when, you know, you're taking action and you're getting involved, thank you. And I'm going to sign off for the night. But anyway, thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks to all of you up there for listening and caring and doing something. You know, all of you up in Kenai have been very instrumental in getting to this point. I mean, we're, like I said before, we're all in this together, and everyone is playing a role. And you know, as long as you feel that you're doing what you can to the best of your ability, then that's what's needed. And I know there's a lot of people that are you know, championing this issue now. So that's very encouraging. So, all right, well, unless anyone has anything else, good night. and see you next week.
Have a wonderful night. Thanks, everybody.
Hello, my fellow Alaskans. I am so glad you guys are back here once again. Sorry about that. I was trying to look something up really quick and didn't realize it had swapped out and that they were done for the evening. Very, very interesting discussion tonight by David Ignell on Chapter 10 of his book, Alaskan Grand Juries, and it is a very deep dive discussion into Alaska politics and the grand jury investigations, especially the ones that are going and investigating our current corrupt judicial system. At the very tail end there, they brought up the school principal from the Matsu Valley who was recently arrested and put into API, Alaska Psychiatric Institute, and was given an evaluation based on so-called, what we might as well just classify as a anonymous tip that she was a danger to society, and we must have her evaluated immediately for her own safety and the public surrounding her. And they're trying to claim that it's all based on a law that was passed last year, HB 172, and people like Representative Kevin McCabe, who have been up, oh, wait a minute, let me see, did I even turn back on my file? Okay, and Representative Kevin McCabe there was one of the ones that had voted yes for it. You've probably seen him in the newspapers over this one too many times, or his own written articles, and many of the other legislators. Now, don't get me wrong, he's not the only one that voted yes. We were pushed another false bill of cells with that bill. That was just like another SB 91, their crime prevention law that did nothing more than create a revolving door of criminals going out there and becoming repeat offenses. And we Alaskans were paying the price as hundreds of thousands, if on top of millions of dollars of property damage and theft that had occurred while that crime spree was going on before they finally got it repealed and got in, I believe it was HB 49 that replaced it. But as with most laws that they pass out there, it too is incomplete. They never put anything in it for recidivism, which was supposed to have been done the year that pandemic had hit. So where do we stand at right now? We got the Alaska Grand Jury investigation. David Haig is one of the main people that are involved in that right at the moment, and they are currently in a grand jury that has been impaneled investigating our corrupt judicial branch here in Alaska. And if you're not aware of who they are, please look them up. All the links are provided either up above on my page, or you can go to Alaska's for Constitutional Rights. You can find them on Facebook, or you can go to the AFCR1776.com for their website, and you'll be able to get all the information that you need to know what is going on and the actions that are being taken and the current grand jury that is impaneled in Kenai. I will also add in on March 15th, we Alaskans, all Alaskans, should participate in the sit-in that is going to happen at all of the courts within the state of Alaska. So if you have a court, let's say like you got the Palmer Courthouse, you got the Anchorage Courthouse, you got the Juneau Courthouse, you got the Kenai Courthouse, anywhere that you have a specific courthouse, Fairbanks, you name it, all of these different courthouses, we want to find as many Alaskans as possible, 8 a.m., to show up and sit in the lobbies of these courthouses and have a sit-in, helping to protect our rights to be able to impanel the Alaska Grand Jury and bring indictments and charges against the people that we are investigating. Currently, there is a judge that is in Kenai that has taken away, had written his own little rule that took away all the powers of our Alaska Grand Jury to actually do subpoenas and indict for criminal charges, pursuing it to the next level after their investigation. These judges said, you don't get to have that right. It was supposed to go in front of a panel of 13 people who are in the what they call the Rules Committee for this rule that was enacted by this judge. And when the rule was supposed to happen, they were given about 2 weeks notice that they were just about to sit down and meet together for their normal meeting time and they would have had a chance to discuss this. But instead, the judge sent out a email, and only 3 out of the 13 was able to respond. Out of those 3 that did respond, 2 of them said this is outright constitutionally illegal to pass. The judge didn't care. The judge unilaterally made the decision and passed the rule all on his own, shutting down all grand jury investigations in the state of Alaska. Now, we have had one judge that has been in charge of investigating all of the grand jury investigations findings out there. This one judge just recently retired. Why is that? Well, it turns out this one judge has heard over 8,000 cases, has overseen over 8,000 judges in cases along those lines. And if you were to actually say that there was just a very small 1% chance that there is a judge that is corrupt out there and has been investigated, and that investigation was oversaw by this one particular judge, and as with all 8,000 cases, just given a rubber stamp, we didn't find anything wrong here, move on, there is nothing to see. Now that the Kenai grand jury investigation has some teeth, this judge has miraculously, for some reason, all of a sudden just decided it's time to retire now that the corruption is going to be able to come to the light. But our judicial branch is fighting this every step of the way, and the way they did that is they changed the rules to try to prevent this grand jury from bringing any subpoena powers or any indictments against these judges. This corruption goes all the way to the Supreme Court of Alaska. There is not a judicial branch within Alaska that this is not affecting, and we Alaskans need to wake up and see what is going on. We need to be vocally speaking out about this. The grand jury investigations has lots of powers. One of the examples they like to give out there is with OCS and the child services that we have in this state. They really do need to be investigated by an independent panel that is there to get down to the bottom line. Do we have a pay-for-play child abduction system that is basically our own child trafficking going on in Alaska that is government sanctioned and supported and hidden by our judicial branch of Alaska? This is a very in-depth investigation that needs to be covered through from beginning to end. Every piece of the puzzle needs to be looked at, and I'll guarantee you there are charges that need to be brought forward against OCS, and I'll guarantee you that there are many people that are within the organization, and I'm not saying all of them are bad. It is a very small minority, but that minority is in the power and control of what happens there, and the rest of the folks that are good folks that are working there, they're having to live by those people's rules and what they will do to them if they don't toe the line. The only way we're going to subject change is by getting rid of the ones that are preventing it from happening, or the ones that are manipulating the system, that control the power right now, because there is nobody above them that can take it away. Nobody above them that can investigate it. Just like our Alaska legislators down in Juneau do all the time. They control the purse strings for the budget for the state of Alaska, and they have declared themselves above the law. They don't have to follow the law, they can break the law. And guess what? Our judicial branch has backed that particular theory that they have, and has granted them the authority to be able to write any law that they want, even if it conflicts with another law and completely goes against what our Alaska Constitution says they are allowed to do. Like, we have a general fund budget, which is everything that has taxed in the state of Alaska, whether it be from timber to oil to fishing to the tire tax for studs to the road taxes to the gas taxes that are all charged to us by our state that we pay a percentage of every time we buy this stuff. They take that money and it goes into one big giant fund, and that's what they're supposed to pay our state budget out of. There is no such thing as a dedicated fund. Well, our judicial branch decided to change that here just 2 years ago, and now the Power Cost Equalization Fund has now been turned into a dedicated fund. Irony to all of that is our permanent fund dividend, our permanent fund dividend corporation, and the original permanent fund dividend law falls more under the lines of a dedicated fund than the PCE does, and has been around in existence a lot longer. But that's not stopping the judicial branch from changing our laws and saying going 100% against our Alaska state constitution and calling that now a dedicated fund, and gave them their all money. They tried to do this again with forward funding for K through 12 and early education last year. It got in front of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, ha 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 ha, yeah, right. No, this goes against the Constitution. You can't do that. And he rejected that additional $1.2 billion that they had forward funded for the next year, this year, coming up year, for education until the budget gets passed. Well, because that was rejected, that was $1.3 billion that they had passed within the budget. Guarantee you, if you've been watching the Senate budget committees and listening to the money that is rolling through and where it is coming from and how much they have available on hand, not once through everything I have listened to in the last few weeks have they ever described that $1.2 billion that they withdrew for early education forward funding last year being returned, or what account that is still sitting in if it was never pulled in the first place. It's a question the Senate Finance Committee and the House Finance Committee completely refuses to listen to. Now, tomorrow in the Alaska Ledge, they are supposed to be having several different things going on there that I want you guys all to be aware of. And give me just a second here. I'm going to go back to that page. The Senate Finance tomorrow was supposed to be listening to their version of the student base allocation, which is Senate Bill 52. And Senate Bill 52 is increasing the base allocation. It was supposed to be held tomorrow at February 3rd at 3:30, but the meeting has been canceled. I'm really confused when they keep telling me these things are supposed to be canceled, why they continue to keep being canceled instead of happening. Well, they're supposed to be having, it shows it again, once again, tomorrow at 8 a.m., and that one is not canceled. So Alaska Ledge's website is not showing what they are supposed to show, and which is really unfortunate, because if you go to the description and what the next meeting is supposed to be and everything else, it says this meeting's canceled. They have still yet to hear this in the Senate for the student-based allocation, but when it comes to House Bill for Education, HB 40 and 41, and they have already listened to the student-based allocation over there. And boy, let me tell you, the NEA Organization of Alaska, the unions of Alaska, the teachers, the poor, underprivileged parents that require all these extras because, oh, I'm so woke, I need help. The ones, you know, the ones that declare their pronouns before they introduce themselves with their actual name, if they provide that to you at all, because they'd rather you use their pronoun, which you'll never remember, because it's some they, their, them, they, something or another. If you watched the last broadcast I had done with the Alaska School District when they were doing the school closures, talking about those 6 schools, the very last one I was at, I got done with my presentation, and here comes a teacher right after that going, that person from the Mat-Su Valley doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. It's like, really? I know more where that money is going to within your school than you do. Why are you not screaming and complaining that you are nearly 6,000 less students than you had since 2010 going to school there? Why is this not affecting the overall student base allocation that you're complaining of? Your administration is at the levels of when it was at its peak levels for student base, and your current teacher staff is still set to 2010 level. But instead of shrinking the administration base or what is costing them the most money in this right now, which is underpopulated schools that are spread across too large of a district area that has too few teachers in the school to teach the amount of students, because for some reason they think you're only allowed to have 20 kids per student. Then you go into places like the Matsu Valley, which has no school buses taking them to school, and they're now telling parents that if you want your kids to go to school, you got to go to school. And the school district won't declare an emergency, declaring that everybody should go to the online learning program. Grand jury investigation, the Alaska Grand Jury, we could impanel one to start investigating our school districts and the schools and what they are doing there. We could have them investigate the woke agenda that they have going, the diversity, the inclusion, the equity, the die program that they have. If you have not seen my video given at the Matsu School Board meeting, and where I had gone up as Lady Die and had given testimony in front of them, please look up that video on YouTube or Facebook. Lady Die, it is hilarious. It was one of the funnest ones. I credit what I did there to Mark Dice. He is the one that gave me the idea to go out there and do my own in my own school board meeting, and it was very worthwhile. But to go back to the one where they were doing the school closures, the second person after the teacher that testified, of course, was one of the woke, and they are one of the ones that identify in the LGBTQ plus minus community, and they declare their they them pronouns before they announced who they are, and they've got the rainbow colored hair going on, and they're instantly calling me the bigot and the racist and the xenophobic, and you Matsu Valley people, you guys are all just the worst of the social class of Alaska, and why would we ever want to model our school system after yours, where they're trying to bring the curriculum back to more reading, writing, and arithmetic, and not the woke agenda that's been infiltrating our school system since 2010, primarily, and before. But the bulk of it has started then and has just got perpetually worse since. Thanks to the pandemic, it opened up a lot of parents' eyes to what was being taught in school. You can't hide the agenda no more if your parents can see it being taught to their children online. Guess what? Schools expose themselves. Now parents are wanting to get more active. It explains why a couple of the schools when my kid was younger that I had sent her to, why they wouldn't allow parents to participate in classes. Makes a lot more sense now to me, now that the agenda has been pushed open out there, why they don't want parents helping to be teachers' aides within the classrooms. Well, I mean, they're talking free help. Someone that could sit there and do nothing but grade papers for the other teachers, you know. I know a lot of parents that would love to be that kind of an aide to help out within their schools. Cut down the cost. Be a part of it. Be able to help the teacher be able to do their job and teach. But parents are no longer allowed within the school systems. We're told not to show up. We're told to stay away. They are there to educate our children. And our children are their responsibility once they enter into the school system. And oh, by the way, why don't you, as Lady Di had put it, once you enroll your child into the public education system, you need to sign away all of your parental rights over to the education system, because they know how to raise our children better than we do. And again, the Alaskan Grand Jury investigation, we could impanel a grand jury to go after these folks and do exactly that. Force them, expose the agenda, get it out in the open for the public to see, and start indicting, giving subpoenas, bringing this forward and into the light so that the whole world can see. Quit leaving it behind closed doors and back door meetings. I mean, the only person that spoke out about the DIE agenda when it was passed during the pandemic, when they were only holding school board meetings virtually through Zoom, which I happen to stream those meetings, so you could always go back and look those up. I believe that was back in 2021 is when that occurred. And you can go back and find those meetings where they had passed DIE within the system, and Donnelly had tried to pass one amendment that says that we will not teach CRT, critical race theory, in school. Because the bottom line was CRT was rebranded as DIE, Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity. It now replaces critical race theory for the acronym. But the same principle and teachings behind CRT is what DIE is. It's just been rebranded, renamed, use inclusion and equity more often, and diversity to say that we need to make sure anybody that's not white steps all over anybody that is white, because white people are the ones that are causing the problem. And that's what critical race theory basically teaches you. Well, DIE is no different. They put your diversity ahead of anybody that is just vanilla. All right, thank you guys all for being here today. If you've hung out with me this long, this is awesome. Tomorrow, again, the Education Committee in the Senate is, and that is going into House Early Development and Education. They're supposed to be hearing for the first time at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. This meeting has been canceled a couple times before now. Tomorrow is the first time they're going to hear it in the House. This has been heard in the Senate already. Public testimony was given on it this week. Teachers and unions all thumping on the ground. Increase the money, increase the money. We deserve it. We don't want any accountability for the money that we get. In other words, performance equals raises. Failure equals nothing. That's the message we should be spreading out there, especially if you're calling in and giving testimony. I mean, this week it's been hell. I'm kicking myself because I did not get to the phone. And I tried to let you guys know, but I know I did a failure of a job at that. And I will do my best to try to get more on top of these public testimonies that are happening out there. But the message should be performance equals raises. You perform, you get under 25 or better. I mean, you get down to the top 10 within the nation. I don't see why we should start complaining about you wanting a student-based allocation raise. You, at that point, would earned it. But being double the cost of nearly anywhere else in the nation, and in some places in the nation, triple the cost of what it costs to provide a quality education, because they're all better than Alaska. Hell, just damn near every single one of them, but two, at what their current stats they're telling us is. Well, out of those two others that are doing better than us, they still do it cheaper than we do to be the worst in the nation by half. So, money is not the reason why you give a quality education. It's the foundation that it is built on that does that, and we've gone away from the foundation. We've moved the brick and the solid rock granite foundation that the school districts used to sit on, and we've moved it over onto the beach and on top of the sand, and we keep watching the sand wash that foundation away, and that's exactly what is going on out there. And we are lost all control in our judicial branch. We've lost all control in our executive branch. I mean, our governor is nothing more than a political pawn. He's got truckloads of red pens. He tried to use them his first year, and he cowered to the recall Dunleavy campaign. And now we've got a governor that I consider a lame duck since day one, that's trying to lock up our resources, selling them as carbon credits for the next 100 years. We'll never be able to touch that land if they do it. And these are the ideas that they're floating out there. Instead of doing what should be done, reducing health care within Alaska, which is 2/3 of the, it's just as much as the education budget if you go by the numbers that they have there. And mind you, when you look at the Department of Health's budget that they have split apart the budget for the health care into two different departments, so it's no longer on one graph as one bar. It's now two bars that are reflecting on both. So in reality, if you looked at the current healthcare costs next to education, healthcare is actually costing us Alaskans more than it is costing us to provide an education in Alaska. 36% of us are now living on welfare of one form or another, and they don't seem to care about that. In fact, we're going to be on the hook for about roughly $60 million this year because the federal contributions are being withdrawn. And if we don't move all those people that were moved into the healthcare system for free healthcare during the pandemic and go back down to the financial levels that it was originally set to, we're going to be on the hook for somewhere around $100 million more a year for just healthcare costs, just trying to keep those people covered unless our Alaska Ledge, the legislators down there, do something to change that. So there is so much going on. I mean, I know I'm rambling on here. It has been nearly 2 weeks since I've been able to be online and actually provide a solid stream. And so this has been wonderful to be able to see my numbers just peaking out right where they're supposed to be throughout this whole thing. It's amazing what warm weather, shedding a roof full of about 2 tons of snow, falling completely on all of the phone lines that connect inside of the building and ripping them all to shreds, and having to have that all rebuilt and put back together again. And I haven't seen streaming like this for quite a while, so it's really nice. And I hope it stays this way. So again, thank you guys all for being here again, once again tonight. You can find this live on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, at Politadick and Politadick Unfiltered. You can also find this on YouTube, and you can also, we'll find this on Rumble within about the next 6 hours once it propagates over to their network. You can help us to live stream there live by going to rumble.com and type in Politadick, Politadick, and subscribe to us. Once we reach 100 subscribers, we will be able to live stream to them live. We are over halfway there for the required number that we need to be able to stream to them live. Your subscription will make it so that we reach that magical 100 number, and we could go there directly so you don't have to sit and wait for it to be found. I do have about 5 more videos that are going to be uploaded here real soon from the past week that I have been to different events and just have not been able to get them uploaded because my network hasn't been working properly, and these are huge files. Now that everything's back up and working again, I should be able to get that done here real shortly, and you'll be able to watch all of those. Excuse me, another presentation by David Haig, Conservatives of Alaska, and Alaska School of Government. And the David Haig was at District 30 meeting last night. Those are the ones that I can think of right off the top of my head that I haven't had a chance to upload. And the mooses that were out in my yard here the other day, a mama, a baby, and a bull moose all palling around together. Some unusual sight to see a bull pull around with a cow and a calf. Not a normal sight to see, but we live in Alaska. Wait till you see the video. You'll probably understand why it was happening. Again, thank you guys all for being here tonight. Don't forget to like and share this video. And always go to our website, politadick.com. Click that support button. All proceeds go right back into helping us do what we do here. Be able to find time to be able to stream like this here tonight. Be able to pay for the services that allows us to stream to all of these different platforms at once. And it's your support that makes that possible, makes broadcasts like this happen. And I'm happy to say our website is back up and running, so I don't have to say be wait impatient. It's actually there, so go to politadick.com/support. The site's not 100% back up and running yet, but it's better than the nothing that was there. Not everything reloaded correctly on the upload. It's less than 24 hours since we've actually got a site that's semi-functioning again. I got to spend a little bit of time before getting this broadcast going, doing a whole bunch of changes, getting rid of a whole bunch of stuff that had screwed up. Still trying to install pictures that had not loaded in correctly. Be patient. We'll get that fixed. But our live feature for watching videos like this one live, it's back up and running once again. That was Politadick-live at politadick.com. Or you can also, like I said, go to our support page. It's working great. We're working on getting everything back to seamless once again. Should be within hopefully the next week, as I personally find time to correct all that stuff and get it done. Thank you guys again for being here tonight. Again, don't forget, like and share. We'll see you guys all the next time.